Well, it's 5 o'clock, and before we say anything else that we regret in life, we'll get started here. And I want to welcome everyone out to our board meeting, our power board meeting this month, and appreciate. I think we've got Mark on right now online.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, Andy's not on yet. Okay, we'll just watch for him. So. All right, welcome everybody, and we'll start on the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Did everyone get a copy of that? And is there any questions, comments, concerns?
Nope.
No questions here.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, Mark second, Todd did the first. So, Dick, would you start us on a vote?
Saunders, aye.
Mark?
Hauser, aye.
Todd? Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you. Item number 2 is the approval of the minutes from last month. Again, did everyone get a copy of those, and were there any comments from that meeting?
Nothing here. But I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. So Mark did the first, Dick did the second. Todd, do you want to start us?
Sure. Spriggs, aye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
And Mark?
Hauser, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you. All right, item number 3 is new business, UAMPS natural gas projects discussion. Rick's gonna take over on this.
Let me see if I can get this to come up. Okay, this is the most important part of the agenda tonight, and it's intended to give you a precursor of what's going to come here fairly quickly, and we'll talk about that as well. But as you're well aware, we're kind of in constant search of the most economical resources, particularly for the future. We currently, our largest resource is really our 5-year purchase that will end in 2027, I think March of 2027. And we're not the only ones in similar boat. There's a need within UAMPS, and I think you heard that at the annual meeting, that UAMPS as a whole needs resources. We're looking into, on the UAMPS side, we've got new wind, solar, geothermal, and natural gas. And so the one that is going to come up first is the natural gas. And it actually has 2 projects. There'll be actually 2 projects that are encompassed in this document, or these charts. And so Matt Hastings with UAMPS, he always does the bluff bottom line up front. That's what that stands for, if you're wondering. Up front. So you tell the answer, and then you go through your presentation. So I don't know if that's so you can ignore most of it.
Maybe should have changed a word, and I don't know, bluff and power should probably go together, but.
So basically, like I said, there's 2 projects, or there'll be actually 2 separate projects in UAMPS. One is a peaker plant, McCormick, which will be up by Holden. And the American Falls will be more of a base load, somewhat similar to Nebo, but on a larger scale. It'll be a combined cycle turbine with a steam turbine on it. And these are what UAMPS, in their analysis, is recommending that Washington would need in both of those projects. So in reality, I would suspect we'll be in the probably 12 to 12.5 megawatts on both. Since we got this information, they presented it to Jake and I Their growth rate was lower than what I think will be. So we sent that to them. I haven't got the updated version, but it'll probably bump it up just a little bit. And so this is, these are charts from UAMPS. This was our projected load from 2024 clear out for another, what's that, 21 years to 40, 45 out in this area. And below is, so this is, if we didn't acquire any new resources, this is how we would look. This orange is that 5-year purchase I talked about, and you see it drops off here. And so basically the white area between the colored bars and the red line is where we would be short on resources. And with these two projects coming in, so you can see, particularly as the load grows, obviously if we don't add anything, it just gets worse and worse as time goes on. And so this brings in, they're calling the McCormick one is the, got to get my greens right, the darker green, and then the American Falls, the lighter green. I probably would have stacked those opposite, but it has the same effect. But you can see once those come online, and right now they're projecting the peaker plant, the one in Utah, would come on in about 28, 29, and then the other plant would be about 30, 31. So we're still a little ways out. And you can see we fill in much nicer, all the various resources. The dark blue is our internal generation. I think this yellow is our Fremont solar that we don't have yet, that's in the, hopefully in the pipeline. The blue is Nebo, and then there's a lot of smaller ones in there that you really can't see that we have part of. So a couple things, even if we participate in these two projects to the level recommended during the summer season, we still have hours where we're short by a fairly significant amount. I would suspect that we would address those through power purchases on the market. Another thing that's taking place within the next probably 18 months, and I think again you heard it at the annual meeting where they talked about the EDAM, or extended day ahead market, that will be coming. PacifiCorp's elected to participate in that, and because of that we kind of get swooped in. And one of the components of that is they're going to require you to be resource sufficient to the tune of 115% of what your projected load is. So you have to have a buffer in there. And so that's what this dash line is. That represents an additional 15%. So really you should have resources clear up to there. Again, they're short duration. That we use them in the summer, and that's where it makes it real challenging to find a cost-effective resource, because you're going to have to buy it pretty much all year, and it's sitting there. And that's why I think contracts would be good if we could just make summer purchases instead of having to carry the fixed cost over the winter. Another thing I think it's worth pointing out, obviously that you look in these future years, it looks much better than what we even currently have, even with the 5-year. And we've been filling those with, like this last summer, we bought some IPP from Bountiful. We've made a Super Peak purchase and other purchases to help cover that. But when that 5-year purchase goes away in 27, there's at least a 2-year gap where we're really short. And so Jake and I are working on coming up with our estimate of what we need, and then we'll send that up to Jordan at UAMPS to put out a feeler to see what kind of purchase we can get in that time frame. And we'll probably even go out to further years to try to address some of this wide area as well, where we'd have more of a summer heavy purchase. But in these, from 27 to 29, we'll need something pretty much every month of some form.
So they recommended that certain amount that we by UAMPS did. How come they didn't recommend more if we're still gonna be short?
The main reason is, well, there's a couple. One is they're really stressing not putting all your eggs in one basket. So diversifying more in different projects. And for the same reason I kind of talked about, if we bought that peaker, another 20 megawatts in it, it's going to set the vast majority of the year, except for those few hours. So there may be other mechanisms that might be more economical.
So we're committing to a certain amount
Yeah.
all year long, yeah.
Yeah, and so this isn't, even if we do these two projects, that doesn't mean we're done. We'll still be acquiring other stuff. Like I said, there's the Fremont Solar, there's a small geothermal a study project, and a couple wind projects that were done at the last meeting, so we'll bring those in more detail in the future. So we're not done by any means, but this, obviously, this period in here looks better than where we even currently are, so.
The second page, it's got that 5.92%. Is that the subscription from UAMPS, or that's not our load, is it?
That would be our percentage of that overall project.
Okay.
So we'd have roughly 6% of the
Does that-
peaker plant.
Does that make us one of the major ones in that project?
Not necessarily. I think there'll be quite a few in that similar range. And unfortunately, I don't have that information tonight to see.
They're still
So
acquiring
when they've
that.
done this and they've sized these plants, it was based on the overall UAMPS needs. And so you've got 50 members kind of doing what we're doing tonight, educating their boards, councils, and then everybody has to decide, yes, we're going to participate or not. Then they're going to have to say, for some reason, a bunch of the big ones or even a combination didn't participate. Well, then we got to look at the size of the project and the subscription levels and what that does. So this is based on UAMPS recommendation. Everybody did what they recommended, which I don't think is going to happen. I mean, it's the chances of 50 people or 50 entities agreeing exactly, it's probably a long shot.
And you think that UAMPS is eventually going to bump it up to 12.5? Is that what you said?
Well, they'll come back, and we can make these numbers anything we want. We could say, hey, we only want to do 5, even though you recommend 12. Or we can say, we want to sign up for 25, even though you only recommend 12, so.
Seems kind of strange. They have all these weird percentages. They do the math on it, and then they
It's all
just
the-
throw it out. Yeah.
The big magical spreadsheets, so.
I want 4.2876%.
What does,
Well, actually, in some projects, they carry it out to 4 decimals,
Yeah.
they do.
if we were to look at this, that then puts this natural gas as a major part of our load, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, significantly, yes.
I mean, I'd say approximately, looks like about maybe a third of what,
Well, like I said, a year ago today, or yesterday, we were at 20 megawatts. So this would be more than our total load, and then we still have NEBO, the solar. So it's gonna put us long on those shoulder months.
and we're still approximately 20 short of hitting that
peak.
capacity anyways.
Right. And so that's
But
the
we're still,
challenge.
even doing this, we're still, so
Yep.
that's gonna have to be in contracts or other sources.
Correct. And that's where I think a contract, say, we only need to buy it for these 4 months, we'll probably pay a little more on average for that, but we're only paying it for those 4 months instead of the whole year.
That's what I was wondering, if you could contract for more for the high demand months and less for the others and pay more.
Not in this project in the
Do they
UAMPS
have-
model.
Do they have,
That's where we would, just like we currently have done past summers, we went out and said, like our Super Peak this last year, we bought from 8 hours a day from UMPA, which is a kind of a somewhat sister organization to UAMPS. They had some surplus over that, so we bought 8 hours a day for those 4 months.
held subject to what's available and what the price is at that time, if there's a big catastrophe somewhere?
Right. And that's why we'd like to do a 2 to 5 year purchase going forward. And at least it locks in those values that we would know for that period of time. But yeah, so that's kind of you're hitting on all the pros and cons. You know, you've got the car in your driveway, but if you're only going to use it 2 or 3 weeks a year, that's pretty expensive to have it sitting there versus maybe I rent a car. Kind of somewhat similar idea. Most of the rest of this, lots of graphs. So this is your typical hourly and the peak month hourly. If we didn't add anything, you can see there's lots of white. Again, we're trying to fill in that white. And then this is the same yellow line with the other resources in there. And you can see obviously it fills it in much nicer than what this is. And that resource adequacy component is going to be mandatory. It's not going to be optional. Like historically, UAMPS has been resource short, and most members are, and they bought on the market to fill those gaps. So you didn't have a investment sitting there. But some of these new requirements are going to force us to be more resource adequate than we have historically done.
Who sets those requirements?
Well, it goes back to, call it the CAISO, California Independent System Operator. That's actually one of the governing boards. And so they've established this market. The different utilities have elected to join that market, and that's part of the requirement to be in that market.
So the same people that might politically say that you can't use gas generation anymore.
And that's another interesting thing to consider. And both of these plants, they're planning on at least having the ability to do some form of hydrogen mix capability.
Like they discussed at the UAMPS
Yeah,
conference.
exactly. And so this was, I don't know if it's a super important graph. It just shows when they come on how much we're going to use each resource. Those first couple of years, the combined cycle isn't there, so the peaker plant really probably would be run more like a base load than a peaker, since you have it. And then here, and this was the utilization of how they do that, and that's just different ways to look at it. Don't know that I probably want to bore you with a ton of these. Yeah, this 1.7 load growth is pretty low for us. We're probably on average more in the 4 to 5 range. So again, if we had that crystal ball, it would be great. And they've made some assumptions when they say NEBO runs perfectly, our internal generation runs perfectly. They mean it's going to be available 24/7 and you don't ever have any maintenance problems or anything like that, which is about all you can do in a study like this, but you hope for that, realizing that's not going to be perfect. So most of these, the IPP and Hunter wouldn't be applicable. They're predicting right now to keep Nebo around till 2044. That'll be long after I'm gone, so. But they did include the Horse Butte one software upgrade, which is a real teeny spot for us, or amount, and then the Fremont Solar. And they are showing, I think I talked a little bit, there is a group that's trying to develop a nuclear project that we'd do a PPA potentially with. And so that actually shows up in the later years out here. I think it's this light blue. Oh no, it's actually the purple. UAMPS nuclear dispatchable, so. Again, once you get past 5 to 10 years, it gets pretty speculative of what's out there. And this just is kind of showing what the city has of various resource types, different amounts. And this just shows our current generator at 6 megawatts with the 3 units. So this is just a little more detail on each of the projects. The Millard County one, which would be the peaker, would have 10 to 12 engines. They're larger than our engines, internal combustion engines. And they, similar to ours, you can get them online quickly. They can ramp up and down quickly. And they're predicting 6 to 8 jobs. And that would be capable of burning a hydrogen mix in sometime in the future, if that makes sense. But I think Dick's exactly right. It's an interesting, about a month from now, we'll have at least a 4-year window of where that may steer a little bit. But the reality is the industry in general is starting to realize you can't do it all on wind and solar. So I think there's going to be a place for the natural gas. The more base load facility would be a 360 megawatt total, which again, Nebo is about 140. So it's what, 2.5 times of what Nebo is. It would be a similar configuration. You'd have a gas turbine and then they recover the heat from that and make steam. Hydrogen mix again, and both sites were selected because of their proximity to natural gas lines and transmission lines. So in general, any questions on that? And then I'll maybe explain kind of what we're looking at going forward here in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Where is it at?
This one's up in American Falls, Idaho. It's interesting, they have the county is called Power County. But it's up there by where the original, the Arco area and stuff. And then this one's up by Holden in the Millard County on that, so. So going forward, we've had a draft power sales contract. We went over that. They'll be sending out more of a final draft to myself. I'll send it to Jeremy and Thad to review. And we need to have any comments back by the 8th, which is about a week from now. And then they would like to have the power sales contracts approved through all the board processes. And again, that's potentially up to 50 boards, plus in our case, 2 that has to go through. So somewhere between 50 to 100 approvals are needed between everybody by the end of November. So the way we originally were not planning on having a power board meeting next month because it's on election night. So we're gonna have to schedule a meeting somewhere between now and the city council meeting. I think is it the 13th of November is what we plan on putting this on. So a few options. I talked this morning at our staff meeting. We could do a one-item agenda on election night. I would guess it'll take 10, 15 minutes. Or we could do the Monday before, would probably be the other recommended date. So it's kind of up to what the power board feels like.
Did we did we discuss cost? I
Actually, I
realize
forgot to
I'm
mention
getting
that.
old, but
Again, let me back up a little bit more too. The cost range they're anticipating for the base load facility is in the $70 to $90 range. Expected probably end up in the 80. Again, this is 5 years from now, so it's probably not a bad price.
And the term length of the agreement is estimated at what?
As long as the plant lives. So if it's a 40-year facility, you'd have that resource for 40 years. It's kind of like NEBO.
So it doesn't expire?
No, this is ownership. This is owned by UAMPS. It's not a power purchase contract like we've done most of the last ones.
and rates don't change over time.
Well, it'll all be based, just like NEBO, it'll be based on our maintenance costs.
Operations.
I mean, your
'Cause it's
initial
ownership.
debt service, maintenance costs, and gas. So it'll be very, very similar to NEBO. If by chance, we couldn't get gas for NEBO, or, when gas went real high before we made the 5-year purchase, NEBO prices went high. So it's up to the PMC group to keep those costs as low as possible. So they've made some assumptions, I think, in the $4 range of gas, things like that, to come up with that range. And then the peaking plant, because it's not utilized as much, that range they're predicting in the 120 to 140 range, which for a peaking resource, power today was running about 125 because of this heat wave. So. What? I'm like, what are you doing? So those are the basic price ranges. And the reason for the accelerated approval is in order to get these resources into the PacifiCorp study queue, that'll have to happen right around the first of the year. If we miss that deadline, it's another year we have to wait before we can get into that queue. And so they're trying to get everything in place. And one of the things that Rocky Mountain requires is a $5 million letter of credit. And so in order to get that instrument in place, they have to have the sales contracts in place in order to do the financial, to be able to post that letter of credit. And so that's going to take some time. And so I think they've left kind of the month of December to get the finance part of it worked out, so we'd be ready to put those applications in. And that's changed in just the last few months. It used to be you could submit these applications, as you were ready, and now they have these hard deadlines. And then it's like a once a year that they'll collect them all for that year and then do the study. Idaho Power is even worse. I think it's about 2 years out. So they needed to get that information up front too. So if by chance there was a major problem on the transmission, electrical, or gas, we'd know that up front so we could turn away before we get too far down a path. Both these sites, they're working with property owners to have at least an option to purchase the land. Site control is what they're calling it. And that's another requirement before you submit these applications. What they've had happen in the past is all these developers have thrown these projects in and they do all these studies. Well, then 90% of the projects go away. And so they're making people post these big amounts to basically only deal with serious people. So that's the reason for kind of a compressed timing to get this approved. I think obviously there's a need, and, you know, so there's no vote or anything we need from you tonight other than to be aware that this is coming and the reasons why. So we definitely have a need. You know, if these don't go through, then we'll probably have to look really seriously at building something on our own, somewhat similar to what we've done, or in conjunction with other members. Because the white gap on these charts isn't gonna go away.
No, it's gonna be.
So we gotta find a way to fill that gap in the most economical way. Again, I think we have a really diversified portfolio. But we do need to have that base load unit that we can turn on when we need it, turn off when we need it, and those kind of things.
So you need to have us meet in some capacity early in November.
Yes.
Now, me personally, I don't have a problem coming in on election day only
I don't know if you're
because,
gonna be glued to the TV or not, but.
yeah, I will be. But
So that would
watching
be,
cartoons.
I would ask the board what you would prefer, and maybe we could pick a date at this point. I don't know what the rest of you. Because Wednesdays are bad because this room's being used by the planning commission or city council. So that's why we thought maybe as an alternative, we could do it that Monday before if election night was a concern.
Whatever you decide, it's good with me.
I don't have a problem with Tuesday. It'll be a shorter meeting, and
Yeah,
I mean,
this would be
now-
the only thing on the agenda.
most times anything election-wise, we now are dealing pre-mailing and stuff, so it's not like we're trying to sit
to
at
the
the,
polls.
the room is available. They don't use this room for elections any longer, do they? So they're in other locations, so.
I don't have a problem with it either. In fact, my other meetings will probably be canceled on that Tuesday, so it'd probably be better for me.
Let's kind of look, Mark, unless you had a comment.
Nope, I'm also good with Tuesday, so, or the Monday before, whatever.
Then let's kind of plan on that, and
We'll
if
just
we
keep
need
it on the
to,
same date, same
Yeah.
time, and just keep it short
let's
and
plan on
sweet.
that, and if it needs to come out, happen, then great.
And when the power sales contract comes out, I can send that, like I say, should have it mid next week. I mean, if you're really needing something to read, it's like 86 pages long of legal, all kinds of stuff, but we'll send it. And there'll probably be just a mini version updated version of these slides that would maybe refine the amounts a little better. But that's the need, the whys, and all that, so.
But really, this is the best option UAMPS has available right now.
At this point, yes.
And if we don't go with it, then it's something that we'd have to generate on our own or figure out something, because UAMPS probably doesn't have anything else in the works that might come up, be an option later, right?
Certainly
So-
not of this magnitude. Like I say, there's smaller, wind projects, geothermal project, but it's not gonna be between the two projects, it's like 500 megawatts, so it's a decent. So.
Okay.
And I think should be obviously, hopefully, an economy of scale to do a bigger project as a group should come in better than everybody doing a bunch of little ones. So. Okay, well, I guess that's what we need. We'll just plan on, was it the 5th, I think, at 5 o'clock, and it'll just be, like I say, just pretty much a one-item agenda. Unless we have to do them as two resolutions, then there'd be a resolution for each of the projects. But I think they're gonna write it that it will, if you're in both projects, they'll write the resolution so it covers both projects.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Are there any other questions on that or on this item? Okay, then we will go to item number 4, our regular business, the operations and generation updates and reports.
Okay, should be able to be pretty quick. I mean, the first thing you've already kind of alluded to, in case you hadn't noticed, this summer was hot. Couple of things. This was an article from KSL. It was entitled, well, I think it was something that the overall state had the second highest summer ever, but then there's this paragraph here that it was the hottest summer on record for Beaver, Garfield, Iron, Kane, Millard, Paiute, San Juan, and Washington and Wayne counties. So we had on the overall average temperature, and we looked at that before on some of the graphs, the high temperature, the low temperatures at night. And then this is the graph I kind of showed you before. This is for September, and this is the little spell Dick talked about there for a few days. It kind of teased us that things were turning around, and then we did this. And these lighter shades, when I did this, it was, I think, last Friday. So, but I think we've been at or above the temperatures shown here. So definitely a warm spell. The rest of the week's supposed to be warm. I think Jake's running the generators 8 hours today, and planning on the rest of the week pretty much in that scenario. Going back to what I said previous, I don't know if everybody was on that. I looked at our load a year ago on September 30th. It was 19 megawatts. Yesterday it was 40. So our load was same day, a year apart. Load was double. So growth continues at a strong pace. You probably noticed the Ash Apartments over here on Telegraph starting to come up out of the ground. The island out more towards our plant off on the left side. You're starting to see framing going on there. So it continues. Unfortunately, it's a broken record, but our lead times are not changing. They're not improving. If anything, they're getting worse. I don't know what this whole the dock workers strike. I doubt that'll improve it in the near term. We'll see how that goes. So
During all this time of expanded growth with all the construction, we still haven't had to delay any developers because we didn't get our material.
well, fortunately for us, how we do things, the developers are responsible to hire a contractor that brings all that material. So that timing is really up to them.
Oh, okay.
So we don't supply,
Buy extra transformers or
No.
anything, just,
our inventory is strictly for maintenance. So we've tried to be flexible a couple times, and to be honest, it's burned us every time we've tried. So they haven't performed. They say, oh, mine will be there next week. It doesn't show up. So we try to give them some options. We've let them use reconditioned units temporarily until their new one comes in. So there's some ways around some of it. So I think I can show you on this one. So on our peak for last month, we had the second highest September. We had the kind of freakishly high year in 2022. But other than that outlier, it was the second highest September. Now I fully expect, I haven't didn't look before I got here, but this line's gonna probably go almost horizontal this way. And will probably be the highest October because of this week. I'm expecting will be in the upper 30s at least. So it'll almost go straight sideways from where this purple line is, so. Generators ran all but 2 days in September. Typically more in a 4 to 5 hour run because the temperatures did moderate a little bit and we had more resources. October, normally load drops off, so our purchases drop off in October. But the load hasn't, so that's why they're running a little harder than we typically would expect in October. The substation, the Grapevine substation and the trailhead, they had their ribbon cutting on Friday. So that project's officially done and open. We're still working on some drainage. As weird as, when you were up there, it's surprising how much water is under that substation site. We've got one drain system in and we're gonna augment it with another one that they're supposed to bore in tomorrow. And if you ever go down by the road there by where people used to park, you can see the water just running out of the side of that hill, so.
That's from Natural Springs.
Yeah. And we knew there was going to be some water, but when they got in there doing excavation, I think it was a little more extensive than what we'd originally planned. I mean, we'll mitigate it and work through it, but it just adds costs and time to do that. They completed the geotech work for the transmission lines, and I'm about halfway through the 60% review on the transmission lines that will get to that site, and hope to get that sent back to the engineer this week. One of the other major projects we have is the AMI, and this is a few slides from a meeting that we had last week with them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through all the details, but basically what will happen is you'll have the various meters located at your house or business, and then they'll all talk to, they call it a data collection unit. And these are going to mostly be located in our substations. And so the meters will talk from there. And then at our subs, we have a fiber connection that will bring it back to the main network. And then it'll be, this Aclara One software is actually hosted in the cloud, wherever that is. So they host it. And there's 2 sites that will initially use cellular instead of the fiber, because we don't have it yet. The one's the Grapevine substation site. And then we'll be putting a pole down by the lift station at the bottom of the hill as you're going out to the dump, off to the, I'm gonna kind of call it north side of Telegraph. But the other sites.
How does that work with solar?
Pardon?
How does that work with solar? Does it communicate with solar to find out how much is being drawn from the solar, or does it just show what you're using?
You'll be able to see both sides of that meter, both in and out, and the production meter as well. That's going to be a little further down the rollout. It's, we got to have some meters out there in order to develop that system. But yeah, that's the goal, is to get that. And one of the things I want to do is basically make a sum group of the solars, the production meters. That would give us an idea of how much the solars actually as a group putting out at any given time. So we'll have 15-minute data on basically every meter that we can look at, or even eventually the customer will be able to look at. So they can see, hey, I turned my air conditioner on, it did this, and they'll be able to see that at pretty good resolution. So yeah, they'll pull the data from this software here. And this is just what some of the typical antennas will look like. I don't think since most of them are in the sub, people aren't even gonna notice that they're there.
Go practice your field goal kicking.
Yeah, it was interesting. This will be what the one on our generation plant looks like. I guess that's the other location that's not a sub, but we'll just put it on the roof of our plant. This was a propagation study that they did that shows with these DCUs at these locations, can you talk to all your meters? And the answer is yes, with the possible exception of the wells that are up in the Habitat Pass Grapevine. The water department already reads those for us since they've got to go up, so it's not a big issue.
You're saying they won't have any problems? You're saying they won't have any problems talking from meter to the
No.
machine? You haven't talked to the internet?
Well, I guess as long as the Verizon thing yesterday was kind of crazy. So this, what we're looking at is this line here. We'll have double coverage at least on all meters other than 344. We'll have single coverage. So that's what their study shows. He said that they put a lot of conservative assumptions in it. So the systems often perform even better than what their study shows. So. And that's just a lot due to topography and where you put things in. And then we'll monitor things if by chance there's an area that we're having issues with. You can always add another DCU in the future. But they're about $7,000 to $8,000 a piece, so we don't want to just throw them out unless we need them. This kind of ties into what Todd, you'll have forward and reverse kilowatt hours and VAR hours on both directions. We'll have demand because of the data we're collecting on every meter. So there are some cities now that are moving to, have moved to demand reads on their residential even, or like a commercial. So this will give us the ability to do time of use, demands on any, it opens up the rate design in the future that we don't have now. And so there's two kinds of meters, is this 210 plus C is for residential and small commercial, and this KV2C will be for our three-phase customers primarily. And let's see. And this was just an example screen, like if we had an outage, it'll pop up, the meters will report when they're out. I think they have, I want to say, what did he say? Was it 10 minutes that it'll report back and say, hey, I'm out. And so we'll get some reports that should help determine the severity of an outage, where it is, whether it's, one cul-de-sac, one transformer, one customer, or a whole big area. And then it will have the ability in the future to tie in with like our SCADA system and eventually get into, they call OMS, an outage management system, which is much more sophisticated, where you could even get automatic texts or alerts, which would be useful to, we have sunbirds, that they're not here. And if it was out for an extended period of time, at least they'd get a notice that they could tell their neighbor, hey, can you go over and make sure things are back on, kind of thing. So there'll be a lot of features coming along. And this is probably the most important right now, is between now and the end of the year, we'll get the system and the software set up. Then they're going to send out a really small sample of meters once we have the DCUs, and we'll set them up, make sure it's working all the way through. Those few meters we'll put them on city buildings. And then after that, they'll somewhere probably in January, February, is when we'll get our first larger shipment. We'll probably still won't go crazy at that point. That's where we'll probably look to people like yourselves that, you know, would understand if there's a hiccup here or there, that we'll kind of use them as guinea pigs, if you will, to help flush out any of the bugs, and maybe other city employees, things like that. And then once those are, because some of it you really can't simulate through the whole billing process and back and forth until you have some deployed. And so it'll be probably a fairly slow ramp initially, and then as time goes on. Probably won't implement a whole big high number of change outs right before summer, because then I think people are gonna have the tendency, oh, my usage is high because you changed my meter, even though they'll be really, both meters will tell you the same thing. So there's a perception there that I think at least we need to be aware of. So that's the basic timeline that the DCUs and the first batch of meters are basically on order. And so now when we get those in, the crews will install the DCUs, and then Aclara will come out and help us set them up and get everything talking back and forth. So it'll be exciting few months to get through all that. So that's probably the biggest project. You just can't really see anything yet physically. We also have a GIS upgrade project going on. Those are meeting weekly. And again, a lot of that data, all these different systems will be tied together, which will be really good for the system. I found it interesting the last few months. In September, we had 3 solar applications is all, and one of those was an existing system that they added a battery to. So the actual number of applicants is quite a bit less than, like last October, we had 15. I think last September was about the same.
Last month was down significantly too, when you.
Yeah. In June, we had 5, July, we had 5. We had 2 in August and 3 in September, and there was 6 of those, 15 were additions, not new installations. So I think they've kind of may have saturated the area, and most people that are interested, at least initially, have done that. So I think there's a couple companies that are targeting people with systems already on their house and trying to sell them a battery or expand it, those kind of things. So we continue to have discussions with Lumen and TDS on the pole attachment. Nothing significant to report there, just working through some of those issues. So I've been showing you these graphs the last few months. So our average cost per kilowatt hour for we just got the bill for August was just under 9 cents. And then graphically, you can see it's this dark purple in here. So what's in our rate is this green line is of 10. So if we stay under that, generally the PCA will tend to fall, which it has and is. So that's again the purple line here. So last month we were basically a negative -0.75 cents for the PCA. So, and comparing what the average costs were, the September's the next month that'll be coming up. Last year we were almost at 12. I expect that we'll be in that same 9-10 range. And so if this column is less than this column, it'll tend to drive the PCA down. And you can see we had some reasonably high numbers this time last year, so I would expect that to continue that trend, maybe not as drastically as we have seen, but it'll still put that downward pressure on, which is good. We already talked about the peak KW, and then the last slide is our average usage, which we just got this today. I was a little surprised with as hot as it's been, the average usage wasn't, you can see we've had previous Septembers with quite a bit higher average usage, so. Some of that was these earlier years, the billing timing was shifted about a week. So the timing, right now we're 20th to 20th, and before it was like the 10th to the 10th. So it's general trends to look at there, not exact. So that was probably part of it, but it still was surprised it was just barely over 1,000. I think that's all on the general system. Outage-wise, I think it was a really good month. I don't think we really had more than just a couple onesie-twosies. Hopefully I don't jinx us, but.
We didn't have any monsoon thunderstorms to knock out power lines and knock
That
trees down
helps.
either.
That helps.
And no birds committing suicide.
So if you, and the crews have changed several poles up in the Cactus Lane area. Can't remember the name of the road that's off of Cactus Lane. Again, some of the older areas. What was it? Yeah, Chola in that area. And then we are working, well, I guess that's part of the UAMPS report item. Any questions on just general local system?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm surprised the city's open.
do we need to sing happy birthday?
No. Let's not get carried away. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And if you believe that,
I can't even do the math. I could still go to the bar 50 years ago. It was still legal.
so something significant may have happened, but that's great. Yeah.
Well, happy birthday.
Thanks.
Well,
Yeah.
Wait another 10 minutes.
it's a carryover from staff meeting today, I think. So,
Item number 5, let's get on to the UAMPS report.
okay. Again, one of the main things there is just securing resources. That's where a lot of the focus is. So, no, we've hit that pretty hard already tonight. Our Central St. George project, we did get in writing the exemption for the looping, which is good. Meetings continue on that. And then next week on the 10th, we'll have our fall meeting with all the area utilities, and they'll present the post-peak report, which basically will just summarize the county. We'll do that in December. We'll present that at this meeting. So not surprising. I mean, in talking to the fellow that puts it together, the county set an all-time peak as well. I mean, not, again, pretty much when one peaks, everybody peaks, so. Nebo's been running great. Vale's been running well as long as Kern River's been compressing gas. On the federal grant, we were successful in getting, it's basically $143,000 towards, we're gonna be replacing poles in the Erie area by the city parks. yard just south of there. We're still working through some of the contract stuff and the Bacon Davis requirements. There's some baggage that comes with a federal grant that we're working through that we're not used to before. This will be the first one, so we'll work through that. The 3 solar projects have all been doing well, basically anywhere from 33 to 40% capacity factor, which is good for this time of year. Our IPP purchase that we made for the summer ended last week. For some reason, they end on the 24th of the month. This is kind of interesting. The prepay that we've talked about, they did not move ahead with it at this point. It's all ready to go, but there wasn't enough difference in the bond markets, tax exempt and taxable, to get the savings that we were promised. So they're just waiting for that spread to get different, and then we could move forward with that. As I mentioned, UAMPS is looking at different projects. One of them's, there's 2 wind projects, is the Horse Butte 2. We're already in Horse Butte 1, so I put in for a small amount of that. And then a Uinta wind study project, a couple megawatts there. There's a really small geothermal. From a resource standpoint, that initial participation, probably we wouldn't even notice it. It's like 150 kilowatts. But what it does, it would provide us a first right of refusal if it's successful, that they expand that geothermal project. It would get us in line that we could be ready for that. We already talked about the natural gas project, and then they're still working through some of the transmissions issues with Rocky Mountain on the Fremont Solar. And that one, we have a fairly large 7.5 megawatt participation in that. So more to come on that. So the current wind projects, Horse Butte was about 18% capacity factor, and Pleasant Valley at 15. So which means it's only there 1.5 hours out of every 10. So that's the challenge with wind and solar. So
What's the average on that?
Horse Butte will, at certain times of year, it'll get closer to 25 to 30. And Pleasant Valley usually is just a little bit lower than that. Again, just depends on where the storms are going through and for that given month. It's interesting, they always present graphs at the UAMPS meetings, and almost without exception, over the year period, they're pretty close to their prediction, but month to month, some months are higher, some months are lower. So you get kind of an overall, but you just don't know when you're gonna get the wind. So that's why I haven't been super aggressive at pursuing wind. And a little more so with solar, at least that's much more predictable. And that's my main UAMPS report. Again, a lot of the focus there is securing these resources. We're not unique or alone in those similar needs. Some are better, some are worse as far as how much they have in the book. So I think that's all I got, unless you got any questions for me.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Are there any questions or comments? Okay,
In here.
then we are looking at planning on next month that we are gonna have a meeting. So mark your calendars on that.
Short one.
A short meeting. And
Not looking at anybody individually, but
Unless there's questions.
send it out. If you have questions, you could ask me beforehand.
okay. All righty, looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll go ahead and motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, Todd did the first, Mark did the second. Dick, would you give us a start the vote?
Saunders, aye.
Mark,
Hauser, aye.
Todd,
Spriggs, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. And with that, we wish Dick a happy birthday and to enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Dick.
Yeah, we're gonna go home and have breakfast.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rick.